Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're going to Masechtas Makkot Daf Tes Vav. We're going to begin on the bottom of Yud Daled Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Omer Rabba Bar Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan. Kol lois aseh shekadmu aseh loikin alav. Anytime you have a los aseh, a negative prohibition, and before it is an aseh, you get malchus. Now, this is not to be confused with a lav hanitik laseh, which we've seen before. A lav hanitik laseh is, for example, by Neusser, it says, Los asurim menuad biker, that you shouldn't leave it over. But then it says, B'eish tisrofu, so you have an aseh afterwards. Over here, the aseh is before. You have a lois aseh, shekadmu aseh. Now, the idea is, since you could do the aseh without doing the avera first, you still will get malchus. So it's only time ein loikin alav is if it's a lav and then the aseh, because the aseh is telling you instead of malchus do the aseh. But over here, just do the aseh and there's no lav. You don't have to end up sinning. So therefore, because of that, since you could do the aseh without the avera first, you're going to get malchus. Okay. So with that, we continue on Tesvav Wanalf. So Amru Lo. So others who heard this said to him, Amrit, did you taka say that? Amru Lo. No, I didn't say that. Amru Rabba Helokim, I swear to you. Amra, that Yutaka did say this. Fiksiva Matanina, says Rashi, Matsinu Kosub, we find that's written, Losas Loisase Shikanmu Aseh, regarding a Losase, which an Aseh is before it, but Tanina Aleha Deloikin, that you get Malchus, Losagale Bikim Aseh. So we already see this. How do you see that? Ksiva, the pasuk says in Sefer B'Midbar V'Yishachu Min Hamachne V'Gaimer that you should send out. This is referring to someone who is tamei, so he should not be in the machne. That's an aseh. V'lo yitamas machneim, and then afterwards it has a los aseh. Don't be matama your machne, which is referring to someone, as we saw in yesterday's daf, someone who comes to the Beis Hamikdash while they're in a state of being tuma, a state of tuma. Tanina, and what do we learn? Habal Mikdash Tameh. That if a person enters the Beis Hamikdash is Tameh, he will get malchus. So we taka see from our Mishnah that when it comes to a lav in which there was an aseh that preceded it, which is this case, a Tameh person who enters in the Mikdash will get malchus. Ella, my time kahadurbe must be that you retracted. But why did you? Mishum dekashlei oinus, because we have an issue when it comes to a woman, as Rashi says, naira basula, a young girl who was a basula, that she was forcefully had similar relations with her, and Rashi quotes the pasuk v'lusil isha lusilcho shalchai, that she will be a wife to you, which is not a say, and then it says, you can't send her away. So let's learn the Gemara over here. It says like this. We know when it comes to an oinus, to sign the oinus shigirish, they're not supposed to divorce her, because it says, now what if you were megarish or give her a get? So Im Yisrael, who, if the guy's a yid, so makser, he has to marry her again. Right, which means that if he does that, he won't get malchus. Right. So what do we see? You have an aseh v'losil isha, which is before the los aseh, and we see you don't get malchus. We see that beferish by oinus. That's why he retracted. Im kohen who a kohen cannot marry grusha like avena makser. Obviously, because he can't remarry her, because a kohen hedjit cannot marry grusha. So there's no din of Makser Grushasai that he's allowed to remarry his wife, even his own wife that he divorced. And therefore he'll get malchus, because there's no remedy. Now let's understand this. Im Yisrael who Makser ben Oloike, Amai, why do we say it doesn't get malchus? Losa says should come say who Phil Wilkie, and they should get malchus. So we see this is why he was chayzer, because it says beferish you don't get malchus. Even though first you had an aseh, then a los aseh. And therefore he sees from oinus that you're talking about malchus. Omer ula. Lo yomer lo siel isha ba'oinus. The pasuk doesn't need to say the words lo siel isha, that she's supposed to remain married to her, someone who's ma'ad as a woman. Rather, because v'ligmer Moitzi Shemra. You could just learn it all out from Moitzi Shemra. Moitzi Shemra, of course, as we know, is someone who was married, and then he goes to the father and says, "Lo matzas lavidcha b'sulim," that I didn't find. I thought your daughter was a b'sula. She's not a b'sula, and the truth is, she only taka was a b'sula, and therefore he has a chiyuv of paying monies to the father as kanas, and also he has to remain married to her too. No, mama might say shemra shalasa ma'isa. By ma'isa, when it comes to ma'isa shemra, he didn't actually do an action. Amar Rachman v'lo sila isha. So the pasuk says, because all he did was he spoke ill about her. V'lo sila isha, he has to remain married to her. So Einis lo kol shekain. When it was ma'anis a woman, which is an action, of course you should remain married to her. So you can just learn out davar pashut. You should be chayv to remain married to her. V'lo sila isha from Moitzi Shemra. So lo menemar. So the question is, so why by Einis do we have this pasuk? So him enu inin lefanav to inu lacharav she'im girish yachzer. So basically, the idea is that instead of it being a lav shekal moaseh, what we'll do is we'll say that it's actually the aseh will come afterwards, and therefore, if he does divorce her, then yachzer. So maybe the reason why you don't give malchus is because of the fact that you don't need to learn out straight from Moitzi Shemra, and therefore it's really not a lav shekal moaseh, but rather we say imin inyan, and therefore we consider like a lav nitikal say, and that's the reason why you don't get malchus. But maybe staka lav shekal moaseh, the din is you don't, as we saw as we began, maybe in that situation you do get malchus. V'kati oinis Moitzi Shemra l'gomer. No, you can't win out from Moitzi Shemra. Why Moitzi Shemra is not even an action and lo sila isha? Because the ikla mifrach and that's kasha mal Moitzi Shemra shechein loikim mishalim. When it comes to Moitzi Shemra, not only get malchus, but you also have to pay. So therefore, since you have malchus and paying, so maybe that's the reason why we're strict over there. So whatever reason, we're strict by Moitzi Shemra. So Mashen King comes in Einis, there's no din of these two punishments. Okay, question 3. Madu Israel Michtav Lo Sil Isha B'Oinis Moitzi Shemra V'Lo Yelfin L'Achad Me'iloch. So Oinis Moitzi Shemra the Leikom El Moitzi Shemra the Leikom Mishal Moitzi Shemra Moinis Leikom El the Mal Oinis Shechein Asa Maisa. Okay. So basically, you can't win out from one another, and therefore, really, it is a lav shekad maaseh, and therefore, because of that, that's the reason why. And it says you don't get malchus. That's the reason why I retracted. Ella loy samol sil ishim b'moitzi shemra v'ligmer mo'inis ma oinish shena loikem mishalim. Even though there's no double punishment, some rachman v'lo sil ish you have to remain married. So moitzi shemra v'lo koshkin v'lo menemar. So im inu lo moitzi shemra tinu inu lo oinis. So we'll say to im inu we don't need it for moitzi shemra. So use their oinis. Im inu lefanav tinu inu lecharav. Moitzi shemra mo'inis nam lo gomer. Niglo mivrach ma lo oinish shechein asa maisa. So again, you can't learn out one from the next. Okay. Don't say those words. Shahari ishtahi. What do you mean, you should be married to her? She's already your wife. So you don't need to say you should get married to her. She's already your wife. So so Taka could learn it out and say, there's no need for her. You already married her. The question is, like, is she a Basula, is she a Ba'ula? You already married her. Right? That's the whole point of the Moitzi Shemra is that wedding night you claim that she's not a Basula. So therefore, that's why, maybe again, why you don't get Malchus, because it's considered like a lav hanitik laseh. The aim of inu in the fun of the Moitzi Shemra to in the lachar the day the lucky. Maybe we should say that, why should we throw it to Oinis, keep it by Moitzi Shemra, and say that it's a lava netik laseh by Moitzi Shemra, you don't get Malchus. And a chinami, you're right. V'yasi Oinis v'gomer minei, and therefore we can learn out Oinis from it. So, b'may gomer minei, how do you do so? Iba kabel chaymer, iba mamad sinu kamifrach. We already had the kasha. Kide parchinan, mal Moitzi Shemra, shechein lo asa maisa. So, you can't learn out by Moitzi Shemra to Oinis. El Omarava Kol Yamav. When it says by Oinis, it says Kol Yamav, all days. Ba'amud v'hichser. Can you arise and remarry her? So therefore, when it comes to oinus, the reason why is not because we borrow the pasuk and Indian. It's just a double portion. When you marry her and you ma'anis her, so there's a v'loisil isha that doesn't go away. You can marry. You're supposed to marry right away. You're supposed to be mekayim. But as long as you have still the ability to marry her, so it always remains. So therefore, it's really like a lav netegah say. V'chein ki also Rabbi Yochanan kol yomav ba'amoid v'hichser. I understand how we said before in previous daf that it's necessary to compare when you get malchus. It's got to be compared to a lav de chasima. And what is a lav de chasima? So it's a situation where when you get malchus, if it's not a lav hanitik laseh and it's not a lav shikon laseh. So that's the time when you get malchus. So over here by Yonis, how could you say otherwise? So Amalei Mishum Nekasame Rachmana Asay Yisera Migra Gra. So the fact that it has another asay, why should it be any worse, right? The fact that it has an asay, shouldn't be worse. So therefore, just nonetheless, you should get malchus. Ihachi. Lav shenit glasei nami leimim mishum nekasabe rachmano asay yisera migur gra. If the asay is after the lav, it's a lav then an asay, a lav and nit glasei. So you can say, well, why do you get malchus there? You shouldn't get malchus. You shouldn't get malchus. Why don't you get malchus? Because it's a lav and nit glasei. So what do you mean? Just get rid of the asay. And why does the asay, which is more sins, right? It's a violation of mimikayim and asay. So you should say if it shouldn't be worse off. So therefore, you also say the din is you should still get malchus. Again, that's the whole notion of lav and nitaglaseh. You can't say that a lav and then I say, what's the purpose of that other say? The assay is to tell you what you're supposed to now do. And by now doing this, then you won't get malchus. Mash ein kain, when it comes to a lav shikanmu assay, so the asay is not telling you what to do because it came before it. And therefore, the asay should not be any different than the lav de chasima, and therefore you should get malchus. Okay. Now, I can understand this whole notion of oinus, that you can always fix it up because somewhere down the road, kol yamav, you can marry her. So the only time that we say that there'll be an issue is bitlo, only when it can never be done will the person get malchus. So therefore, in this case, by oinus kol yomav, you can marry her, and therefore we're not going to give you malchus because you could always be mekayim it. There's also another shita that you will get malchus as soon as you're not mekayim it. The whole notion of lav nitaglaseh is you have to do it now. Right, we're telling you this is what you need to do, which is you have to be mekayim. If you're not mekayim, then you're going to get malchus. So the question is, the fact that it says kol yomav doesn't really help by yonis, because you should still be chayiv malchus if you hold kimu. So as we continue to test Vavam Beis, midihu taimel Rabbi Yochanan. So that's only according to the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan. Ha'imel Rabbi Yochanan tani batu chayiv. Lo batul potter. Rabbi Yochanan said the din that it's all totally on being mavatal. And since if you're not mavatal, so therefore you're going to be potter from malchus. So therefore, in the case of oinus, that's the reason why you don't get malchus, because you were not mavatal. Tani kamei Rabbi Yochanan. Kol mitzvah soisa say sheish v'kuma say. If let's say you have a losa say, and then there's a kumas as what you're supposed to do afterwards. So kiyama say shabbat potter. If you do it right away, then you're potter from malchus. Bitol also say if you're mavatal it shabbat chayiv. Now this is a little bit problematic because it says kayim and then bitol. So amalei my kamrat kayim potter lo kayim chayiv bitol chayiv lo bitol potter. So how do you read this? So tani you should read it like this: bitol lo bitol. That it's not if you're mekayim it, but rather if you are mavatal it, be a daim, that's when you get malchus. But if you're not, as long as you're not mavatal be a daim, it's shaykh, but you continue to do the assay eventually, so you're never going to get malchus, according to that sheet. Rabbi Shimon Malchus Shemer Kimu Lo Kim. Rabbi Shimon holds no, it's totally on whether you can be Mekayim it now or not. And if you're not Mekayim it right away, then you get Malkus. So, V'mai Kamifgi, Basra Safik Kamifgi. Mar Savar Hasra Safik Shma Asra, Mar Savar Hasra Safik Lo Shma Asra. Says Rashi. According to Rav Yochanan, he will hold, Rav Yochanan Savar, first one line, Hasra Safik Shma Asra. A questionable warning is still considered to be a warning. And therefore, even though you say, you did this Losa, say, you are, and then you give him Hasra, but it could, if, let's say, down the road, it could still be done. So if you'll bitlu, that's because, even though it's a Hasra Safik, because you don't know if he's going to end up completing it, it's still considered to be Hasra. However, Rish Lakish holds Hasra Safik is not a Hasra, says Rashi Hilkoch, Im Hayigamar Halav, if he learns the lav is totally bebittel haaseh lo hayaloikalav, you won't get malchus. El halav mishigirish nigmor v'havile hasras vadai. Again, if you react immediately, v'asa nitan lios tachas hamalchus, and therefore the aseh is instead of malchus. Ukashiyavla based in o yikayim o yilke. According to Rish Lakish, you either do it or you get malchus, because he holds otherwise it's a hasra safek is not hasra. V'yazlo tamayu. They both go according to the reasoning. The idmar shvua she'oichel kikar zu hayoyim. Let's say a person makes a shvua on himself, which is a shvua on the gavra, that regarding eating this bread today. Vavar hayoyim, the day goes by, v'lo achla, and he didn't eat it. Now he made a shvua that he was supposed to eat this bread, and he didn't eat it. So it was a non-action. So Rav Yochanan and Rav Shlomo in a loika. They both say you don't get malchus, but for different reasonings. Rav Yochanan in a loika, as we continue to test Zayim and Aleph, Mishum Dahavi Lav Shem Bo Mais V'Chol Lav Shem Bo Mais in loika Lav. Because again, you said I'm making a shvua, I will eat this bread, and they just never eat it. So it's a Lav Shem Bo Mais. You don't get malchus on that. Rish Lakish says a different reason. So Rish Lakish says it's all totally on Hasra Safek, because if you make this statement, so we can't warn you because we don't know are you going to end up eating it or you're not going to end up eating it. So we don't know if you're going to violate your shvu or not, and therefore it's Hasra Safek, and because of Hasra Safek we can't. That's not considered to be a warning. A warning has to be Hasras Vadai, and therefore that's the reason why you would not get. In that situation, you'll get malchus. Will leave the kuli alma, but again, it illustrates the notion of when it comes to hasra safek, whether it's shmo hasra or not. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's look at question 3. Madu Israel chamifta v'lo stil isha ba'oinis u'ba'moiti shemra v'lo yalfin. So we did this because moiti shemra is not an action, and oinis is an action. On the other hand, Moitzi Shemra is Malkin Mishalman. Question 4. I don't think we finished this, but let's look at some of it. For question 4. Elohein Dal Dinim B'chayvi Malkos Depligi Rav Yochanan Rish Lakish. So we saw a couple of them actually. Lav Shekadmo Asay if you get Malkus. Lav hanitak lasei bitlu loika lo kimu loika hasra safik shmo hasra lo, and this is going to be alluded to the fact that he mentions it's because of lav shem bo ma'isa. Why didn't he also say that reason? Must be, but they also argue about lav shem bo ma'isa whether you get malchus, right? The fact that why does Rav Yochanan say it's because of Lav Shem B'Maisa? Rish Lakish could have also said the same thing. Must be Rish Lakish holds a Lav Shem B'Maisa is like in a Lav. So those are the 4 things. Again, the 4 things where Rish Lakish and Rav Yochanan disagree is a Lav Shekadmo Aseh, a Lav Anitak Aseh if you hold Bitlo or Kimu V'Lo Kimu, Hasra Safek Shma Asra, or Lav Shem B'Maisa like in a Lav. So that's an excellent question. Fine. Question TA 16. Rish Lakish became below kimu. Madur Rish Lakish l'shitaso l'mati saver bitlo bitlo. Why can't Rish Lakish l'shitaso hold bitlu v'lo bitlu, because we said it's totally on hasra safek. And since he holds hasra safek, lo shmo hasra, and we don't know if he's going to end up being mavatal de asay, so therefore it doesn't work. That's why it has to be kimu v'lo kimu, so it's a hasras vadai. So the fact that Reish Lakish says, since Reish Lakish holds, this is TA 16, the hasra safek lo shmo hasra, right? So therefore, because of that, it's not shaykh to say bitlu bitlu. So they're totally zebazet. Question. Okay, here we go. TA 17. Shur shaychel kikar zu hayoyim ve'avar hayoyim lo achla madua eno loike. So two answers. Either because the lav shem b'maisa or because it's hasra safek. Okay, beautiful. So that's the another kasha, which I wasn't expecting there. That's question TA 17. Mishum dahavi lav shem b'maisa v'chol lav shem b'maisa ein loike lav. Reish Lakish says, mishum dahavi hasra safek chol hasra safek lo shmo hasra. Let's just mark this over here too. TA 17. Shvua she'achal kikar ze hayoyim v'avar hayoyim v'lo achla. So they both say eno loika. Okay. All right. Very good. TB 17. Yisrael ha'oinis. So Yisrael was ma'anis a woman, and she girish, and he divorced her. Beis oivim shkachs l'shiyilka al hagerishin. Where do we find Taka that he'll get malchus? So I think the answer is just push it if he's a kohen. I think that's all you have to write. That's TB 17. So TB 17. Where is that? Im Yisrael hu maser im kohen hu loika ve'enu machzer, because there's nothing you can do about it. Alternatively, I guess if you want to get a little more into it, you can say, according to Reish Lakish, kimu v'lo kimu. Okay, let's see what I wrote. Im omer kimu v'lo kimu az chayiv im lo chazer mekadosh miyad. Avol bitlu im haragos, if you killed her. Yesh din shel kamen ben Rabbi mina. So you'll be chayiv misa for that. Ve'ulai afilu noider al das based in o barabi yochel ahater hoyel ze mitzvah lo rishos lefikach lozman l'malchus maskana im oimer bitlu bitlu. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. I think the answer is just push it if it's a kohen, or if you hold kimu v'lo kimu, right? So, that would be it. I would also write. Let me just write this. Imhu koyin. I think that's the answer. I don't know what everything else I was writing over there. Adkan.